By the time Duke Alistair Ravenshaw found his daughter in the snow, he had already ordered every servant on the estate to search for her. The little girl had been missing for nearly an hour. Then someone remembered the winter garden, the place where her mother used to take her. Alistair pushed through the snow-covered doors and stopped. His daughter was sitting beneath a stone archway, alive, shivering, and wrapped tightly in a servant's cloak. The servant herself was lying in the snow. She had given the child her cloak, then used her own body to shield her from the cold. "Clara," the little girl lifted her head. "Papa, don't take her away." Alistair rushed forward and pulled his daughter into his arms. Then he turned toward the unconscious servant. "Who is she?" No one answered immediately. The housekeeper finally whispered, "Eliza Hartwell, Your Grace." Alistair went completely still. "Say that again." "Eliza Hartwell." His face changed. The housekeeper had never seen the Duke look like that before. He stared at the unconscious young woman as though she had suddenly become someone else. "How long has she worked here?" "Nearly 8 months." 8 months, and he had never once asked her name. The Duke looked down at the woman who had nearly frozen to death protecting his child. Then he whispered, "That cannot be her daughter." 3 weeks earlier, Clara had begun disappearing into the old winter garden whenever she missed her mother. Lady Margaret had loved that place, and after her death it became one of the few corners of Ravenshaw Hall where Clara still felt close to her. Eliza Hartwell had discovered the child's habit months earlier. She had worked at Ravenshaw Hall for nearly 8 months, quietly doing her duties and avoiding attention. She read to Clara, helped her with little tasks, and listened whenever the girl spoke about her mother. So when Clara disappeared that evening, Eliza knew where to look. She found the little girl beneath the stone arch, crying. "Come inside, Miss Clara, it's too cold." Clara shook her head. "Mamma used to sit here." Eliza knelt beside her. She understood at once that this was not ordinary disobedience. "I know," she said softly. "I don't want to leave. Your father will be looking for you." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Everyone wants me to forget her." Eliza shook her head. "No one can make you forget your mother." Clara reached for her hand. "Please stay." Eliza should have taken her inside. She knew that. But Clara was frightened, and Eliza believed a few quiet minutes would help. She sat beside her. Then the snow began to fall harder. The wind rose suddenly, pressing against the old glass doors. Eliza looked toward the path. "We have to go now." Clara clung to her. Eliza tried to lead her inside, but the child refused to move. The snow was already gathering around their shoes. Eliza removed her own cloak and wrapped it around Clara. "There, better?" Clara nodded, shivering. Eliza tried to carry her, but the deepening snow made every step difficult. Finally, she sat beneath the arch and pulled Clara against her, using her own body to block the wind. "Stay awake for me," she whispered. "Your father will find us." She kept talking to the child, even as the cold began numbing her own hands. Inside Ravenshaw Hall, Alistair had joined the search. Fear had replaced the controlled calm he normally wore. When someone mentioned the winter garden, he remembered Margaret taking Clara there and went himself. "Get them inside," he ordered. The servants carried Eliza while Alistair took Clara. The physician examined the child first. She was cold and exhausted, but stable. Then he turned to Eliza. His expression hardened. "She has been exposed too long." Alistair watched him. "Will she recover?" "I believe so, but she was close to serious illness." He glanced at Clara's cloak. She gave the child her own cloak. Alistair said nothing. The physician added quietly, "She was protecting the girl." Clara woke before morning. "Where is Eliza?" "She's being treated." "Can I see her?" The physician objected, but Clara became so distressed that Alistair finally allowed her to sit beside the bed. She took Eliza's hand. "She saved me," she whispered. Alistair looked at the unconscious servant and realized that a woman he had barely noticed had nearly died for his daughter. Over the next few days, he began seeing how much Eliza mattered to Clara. She had read to her, listened to her memories of Margaret, and never spoken against him. She had simply been kind. Alistair was a capable father in practical matters, but since Margaret's death he had struggled to speak about grief. He kept Clara occupied because he believed distraction was better than sorrow. Eliza understood otherwise. When she finally woke, Alistair visited her. "Why didn't you bring my daughter inside?" "I tried." Eliza explained that Clara had refused because the winter garden reminded her of her mother. Alistair stared at her. "How did you know?" "She told me." The answer unsettled him. Clara had confided in a servant what she had never told her father. He looked at Eliza properly for the first time. Her hands still trembled from the cold. "Do you need anything?" "No, Your Grace." Then she added, "Only that Miss Clara is well." Later, Alistair found the housekeeper. "How long has Miss Hartwell worked here?" "Nearly 8 months." "And no one thought to mention her family?" Mrs. Bell frowned. "Her family, Your Grace." He hesitated. "Nothing." Clara soon began visiting Eliza while she recovered. Eliza never encouraged disobedience. "You must listen to your father," she told the girl. Clara smiled. "You listen to Papa too." Eliza laughed softly. "Of course." Alistair noticed. He also noticed that Clara began sleeping better and eating properly. One afternoon he asked Eliza, "What have you been telling her? Nothing she didn't already know?" "Then what changed?" Eliza answered simply, "I let her miss her mother." Alistair had no reply. He began to wonder whether he had been trying to make his daughter stop grieving instead of helping her live with it. When servants began gossiping about the attention Eliza had received after the rescue, Alistair overheard them. His voice turned cold. "Miss Hartwell saved my daughter's life. Anyone who finds that worthy of ridicule will answer to me." Eliza recovered and insisted on returning to work. Lady Helena suggested she rest longer, but Eliza refused. "I am here to work," she told Mrs. Bell. She wanted no special treatment. Yet Alistair had begun noticing her. She was efficient, quiet, and never sought his attention. She treated him respectfully, but without the nervous eagerness he was accustomed to receiving. One evening Clara asked Eliza to read to her. Alistair stopped outside the nursery door and heard his daughter laugh. It was a sound he had rarely heard since Margaret died. He remained there for a moment before walking away. Eliza had brought something back into Clara's life that he had not realized was missing. Later, he saw Eliza folding a handkerchief. Something about the movement stirred an old memory. He could not place it. He dismissed the feeling. Weeks passed. Clara recovered completely. Eliza returned to her ordinary duties. Alistair's attention, however, had changed. One afternoon, he found her alone. "Thank you, Miss Hartwell." She looked up. "For what, Your Grace?" "For what you did that night." Eliza lowered her eyes. "I only did what anyone should have done." "Not everyone would have stayed." She looked toward the window. She was frightened. Then she walked away. Alistair watched her go. He wanted to know more about Eliza Hartwell. He wanted to understand why her name had unsettled him the moment he heard it. But before he could follow the thought, Clara called from upstairs, "Papa, is Eliza coming?" He looked toward the staircase. For the first time, the question was no longer simply, "Who is Eliza Hartwell?" It was, why does his daughter trust her so completely, and why does he suddenly find himself wanting to know her too? Alistair began finding reasons to be near the nursery. At first, he told himself it was because Clara had changed since the night in the snow. She slept better when Eliza was nearby, and he wanted to understand why. But after several days, he realized he was listening for Eliza's voice, even when Clara was not in the room. She never seemed impressed by his title. She answered his questions directly, never flattered him, and never tried to turn Clara's affection into influence. One afternoon he found her in the nursery while Clara slept. "How long have you worked here?" he asked. "8 months, Your Grace." "And before?" "Ravenshaw Hall." Eliza hesitated. "Other households." He studied her. "And your family?" Something changed in her expression. "There isn't much family left." He sensed the subject was unwelcome and did not press. Yet her answer stayed with him. Clara soon began creating reasons for them to spend time together. She asked Eliza to read while her father sat nearby. She wanted to show Alistair things Eliza had taught her. Sometimes she simply asked them both to stay while she played. Neither adult recognized what the child was doing. Alistair also tried to show his gratitude. He ordered that Eliza receive additional compensation for the snowstorm and arranged for her to have warmer clothing. He even reduced some of her heavier duties. Eliza thanked Mrs. Bell but asked her to return the privileges. When Alistair learned what she had done, he confronted her. "Why did you refuse what I offered?" Eliza lowered her eyes. "Because I am employed here, Your Grace. You saved my daughter's life, and I was doing my duty. You nearly died." She looked at him calmly. "That doesn't change my position." Alistair was silent. He had never encountered anyone so determined to remind him that she was beneath him when he was trying to make her life easier. Instead of withdrawing his concern, he began asking for her opinion. How had Clara been sleeping? What books did she enjoy? What frightened her? Eliza answered without hesitation. She told him Clara did not need to be constantly distracted from her mother. She needed permission to remember her. Alistair listened. Slowly, he began changing. He took Clara into the winter garden himself. He asked about Margaret. When Clara wanted to talk about her mother, he no longer changed the subject. Eliza watched the difference without taking credit for it. Alistair was becoming the father his daughter needed. One evening, Eliza was walking Clara back to the nursery when Alistair joined them. Clara had fallen asleep against Eliza's shoulder. "Give her to me," he said quietly. Eliza carefully transferred the child into his arms. Their hands touched for a brief moment. Neither spoke. Eliza immediately stepped back. "Good night, Your Grace." She walked away. Alistair watched her disappear down the corridor. The brief contact should have meant nothing. Instead, he found himself thinking about it long after she had gone. Eliza began noticing his attention too. That frightened her. She remembered her mother's warnings from childhood about powerful households. Kindness from people with power could feel safe until the day it was withdrawn. She knew what happened when someone below stairs began believing she belonged somewhere above her station. She had no intention of making that mistake, so she created distance. She became more formal. She stopped lingering after Clara fell asleep. She declined personal gifts. When Alistair entered a room, she found reasons to leave. He noticed almost immediately. One afternoon he found her alone. "Have I offended you?" "No, Your Grace." "Then why are you avoiding me?" "I am not avoiding you." "You are." Eliza looked at him. "I'm remembering my place." His expression tightened. "Your place?" "I'm a servant in your household." "I know that." "Then perhaps it is best that we both remember it." Alistair stared at her. "I have never treated you with contempt." "I know. She paused. That's what makes it difficult. Then she walked away, leaving him more confused than before. The matter became worse when a senior servant made a remark within Eliza's hearing. It is dangerous for a servant to forget the distance between herself and the family she serves. Eliza calmly answered, I haven't forgotten. Alistair, who had overheard the exchange, finally understood that her distance was not arrogance. It was fear. He later asked Mrs. Bell whether Eliza had ever experienced trouble in another household. The housekeeper shook her head. Not that I know of. Her mother was the one who had difficulties years ago. Alistair looked at her sharply. Her mother? Mrs. Bell seemed surprised by his interest. Yes, Your Grace, but that was long ago. The name stirred something again, but Alistair did not investigate. Lady Helena, however, had noticed her son's growing attention toward Eliza. One evening, she spoke to him privately. Be careful. Alistair looked at her. Of what? Kindness from a duke can easily be mistaken for something else. He answered, I know what I mean. His mother studied him. Do you? He had no immediate reply, because he was beginning to understand that he did not know how to describe what he felt. He admired Eliza's courage, he respected her judgment, he trusted her, with Clara, but it had become more than that. He thought about her when she was absent. He noticed when she entered a room. He wanted to hear her opinions, even when they had nothing to do with Clara. He was falling in love with a servant, and for the first time, the realization frightened him. He tried to make his feelings clearer without forcing her. He thanked her personally. He complimented her work. He asked her to walk with him through the grounds. She hesitated, but eventually agreed. As they walked, he said, You have become important to my daughter. Eliza smiled faintly. That is enough for me. Alistair looked at her. It isn't enough for me. She stopped. For a moment, neither spoke. He did not explain. Perhaps he did not know how. Eliza understood enough to know she had to leave. The more gently he treated her, the harder it became to remember that she was only a servant. She had seen what happened to her mother when a powerful household decided that someone beneath them was no longer welcome. She would not wait until affection became dependence. She would leave while she could still do so with dignity. The following morning, Eliza approached Alistair. Your Grace, may I ask you for a recommendation? He looked up from his desk. A recommendation? Yes. He stared at her. You're leaving? Yes, Your Grace. Why? Eliza folded her hands. I came to Ravenshaw Hall to work. He waited. And lately, she hesitated. Lately I have begun forgetting why I came. Alistair's expression changed. Have I made you uncomfortable? No. She looked at him. You have been kind. Then I don't understand. Your kindness has been generous, but I cannot afford to depend upon it. He stood. You think I would hold it over you? No. Her voice softened. You have made it too easy to forget the difference between us. Those words wounded him more deeply than an accusation could have. He had spent weeks trying to show her that she mattered, only to discover that his attention had made her feel less safe. Eliza went to Clara next. The child knew immediately that something was wrong. Are you going somewhere? Yes, sweetheart. Clara's face fell. Did Papa send you away? No. Eliza knelt beside her. I need to work somewhere else. But you're my friend. Eliza embraced her. And I will always remember you. Clara began crying. Will you come back? Eliza closed her eyes briefly. She could not promise what she did not know. Be good for your father, she whispered. He loves you very much. Alistair watched from the doorway as Eliza left the nursery. He wanted to stop her. He could have ordered her to remain. He could have used his authority. But she had made her choice, and he could not force the woman he had come to care for to stay. So he let her go. The house changed immediately. Clara refused the replacement maid. She became quieter. She stopped asking for stories and avoided the nursery activities she had once enjoyed. Every day she asked the same question. "When is Eliza coming back?" Alistair kept answering, "She has gone to another position." But when Clara asked why, he had no answer. Within days she stopped eating properly. Then came the fever. The physician was summoned. Alistair stood beside his daughter's bed while the doctor examined her. "She needs rest and calm," he said. Clara opened her eyes weakly. "I want Eliza." Alistair's chest tightened. He finally understood what he had failed to see. Eliza had not simply been a servant Clara liked. She had become an emotional anchor for a child still grieving her mother. And he had allowed that anchor to disappear because he had not understood why Eliza was afraid to stay. He sat beside Clara until she fell asleep. Then he rose. "Find out where she went," he told his valet. The man hesitated. "Shall I send someone, Your Grace?" Alistair looked toward his daughter. Then he answered, "No." He reached for his coat. "I'll go myself." Alistair found Eliza the following afternoon. The address had been provided by the household placement service, and when his carriage stopped outside the modest townhouse, he remained seated for a moment, staring at the door. He had come as a duke, but he knew that was not how he wanted to speak to her. He had allowed her to leave because she had asked for freedom. Now he was standing outside another household because his daughter had become ill without her. When Eliza opened the door, surprise crossed her face. "Your Grace?" Alistair removed his gloves. "I need to speak with you." Her expression immediately changed. "Is Clara all right?" He did not soften the truth. "She's ill." Eliza went pale. "How ill?" "The physician is concerned. She has stopped eating properly and she refuses to settle." Eliza did not ask what position Alistair could offer her. She did not ask whether she would be paid. She simply turned toward the room behind her. "I'll come." Within minutes, she had gathered her things. Alistair watched her closely. She had not hesitated for herself. She had not asked whether Ravenshaw Hall still wanted her. She had only wanted to know whether Clara needed her. The journey back began in silence. Snow still covered parts of the countryside, though the storm had long passed. Eventually Alistair said, "You could have told me why you were leaving." Eliza looked out of the carriage window. "I tried." "You said you didn't want to depend upon my kindness." That was true, but it wasn't the whole reason. She was silent for several moments. Then she said, "No." Alistair waited. "There is something you should know." He turned toward her. "My mother once worked at Ravenshaw Hall." The words struck him immediately. "Your mother?" Eliza nodded. "Many years ago, before I was old enough to remember the house." Alistair's expression became still. "What was her name?" Eliza told him. For a moment he could not speak. The name was the same one that had unsettled him on the night of the snow, the name he had heard and immediately recognized without knowing why. He remembered his own words to Mrs. Bell. He remembered the strange certainty that Eliza's mother could not possibly be connected to the woman he had once known. Now the pieces were beginning to fit. "What happened to her?" he asked. Eliza folded her hands tightly in her lap. "She was accused of stealing." Alistair stared at her. "She denied it." Eliza continued quietly, "But the family dismissed her. She left Ravenshaw Hall with me." "How old were you?" "Very young." She looked down. "After that, she never spoke bitterly about the Duke. She only taught me to be careful around powerful households." Alistair's jaw tightened. "What did she tell you?" Eliza hesitated. That people with power can be generous until the day they decide you're no longer useful. The words settled heavily between them. Alistair finally understood why his kindness had frightened her. It had never been his generosity alone that she feared. It was what might happen when the generosity ended. He looked toward the road. "What was your mother's name?" he asked again, needing to hear it clearly. Eliza repeated it. This time there was no doubt. The mystery that had followed him since the winter garden had finally found its shape. But Clara was still ill. Alistair said quietly, "We'll speak about this later." Eliza nodded. "Yes, Your Grace." When they reached Ravenshaw Hall, Eliza went directly to Clara's room. The child was pale against her pillows. The moment she saw Eliza, she reached out. "Eliza." Eliza crossed the room and took her hand. "I'm here." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "You came back." "Of course." She sat beside her and said nothing more. Within minutes, Clara's breathing began to settle. Alistair stood near the door, watching. For the first time in days, his daughter looked peaceful. Over the following day, Clara's fever began to ease. She ate a little. She listened while Eliza read to her. Alistair remained nearby but did not interfere. The woman who had once protected his daughter from the snow was now helping her recover from the loneliness he had failed to recognize. Only when Clara was safely resting did Alistair turn his attention to the past. He went to Mrs. Bell. "Tell me everything you remember about Eliza Hartwell's mother." Mrs. Bell looked troubled. "It was a long time ago." "I know. She was accused of stealing valuable jewelry. Was she guilty?" Mrs. Bell hesitated. "I never believed she was." Alistair's eyes hardened. "Why?" "Because the accusation came mostly from one person. There were whispers that another servant had been suspected, but no one wanted the matter examined properly." "Who made the accusation?" Mrs. Bell gave him the name. Alistair remembered the family records. He ordered the old household accounts and correspondence brought to him. By evening, an elderly former housekeeper had been found and brought to Ravenshaw Hall. She remembered the case clearly. "That woman wasn't a thief," she said. Alistair looked at her. "Then why was she dismissed?" The old woman lowered her eyes. "Because the household wanted the matter finished." She explained that the stolen jewelry had later been found, but by then Eliza's mother had already left. Admitting the mistake would have embarrassed the family. So the truth had been buried. An innocent woman had carried the shame because correcting the accusation would have been inconvenient. Alistair sat in silence. He was furious, but not at Eliza, not even at her mother. He was furious at the system that had allowed a powerful household to protect its reputation at the expense of a servant's name. He went to find Eliza. She was sitting beside Clara's bed. "Your mother was innocent." Eliza looked up slowly. "Are you certain?" "Yes." He explained what he had discovered. For several seconds she said nothing. Then her eyes filled with tears. "She always said she was." Alistair's voice softened. "She was right." Eliza looked away. "Then why did nobody tell her?" He had no answer that could make the injustice smaller. Finally he said, "Because the truth was less convenient than the lie." Eliza closed her eyes. She had spent years carrying a warning born from an injustice she had never been able to prove. Now, for the first time, someone had finally told her that her mother had been telling the truth all along. But Alistair was not finished. He discovered that Mrs. Hartwell was still alive, living modestly some distance from London. He decided to visit her himself. When Eliza learned where he was going, she looked startled. "You don't have to." "I know." He left anyway. When Alistair met Mrs. Hartwell, he did not hide behind his title. My family accused you of something you did not do." The older woman studied him. That was a long time ago. It was still wrong. He explained what he had found and gave her a written statement formally acknowledging the error. He also restored what had been unfairly withheld from her. Mrs. Hartwell looked at the document for a long time. "You are not responsible for what happened when you were a boy," she said. Alistair nodded. "Perhaps not, but I am responsible for what I do about it now." When he returned to Ravenshaw Hall, Eliza learned what he had done. She was moved not because he had restored money or offered her favours, but because he had gone himself. He had corrected the wrong without demanding anything in return. That evening Alistair found her alone. "You don't have to return to Ravenshaw Hall," he said. Eliza looked at him. "What? You asked for a recommendation, you can have one. If you want another position, I'll provide whatever you need." She stared at him. "You don't owe me your service because I corrected what my family did." He paused. "I wanted you to be free." Eliza's eyes softened. Then he added, "But if you stay—" He stopped. "I don't want you to stay as my servant." Her breath caught. "Then why?" "I want the opportunity to know you as the woman who saved my daughter." He looked at her steadily. "And as the woman I have come to love." Eliza was silent. She had feared his kindness precisely because she had been afraid of what would happen when it ended. Now, he was giving her the one thing she had wanted from the beginning, the freedom to leave. "What happens when you stop loving me?" she asked. Alistair did not offer some impossible promise. "I cannot promise that I will never disappoint you." He took a breath. "But I can promise that you will never again have to wonder whether you are safe in my house." Eliza looked toward Clara's room. She was not suddenly transformed into a duchess. She was still Eliza Hartwell, the servant who had once wrapped a child in her cloak. If she remained, it would have to be because she chose to. Clara's recovery completed what the snow had begun. Within days, she was eating normally again and asking to go outside. One afternoon, she looked at her father. "Is Eliza staying?" Alistair looked toward Eliza but did not answer for her. Eliza smiled. "If your father will have me." Clara looked at Alistair expectantly. He smiled. "I believe we would both like that." Later, he asked Eliza to walk with him. Together they returned to the winter garden. The snow had melted from the stone path. The place no longer felt like the place where he had nearly lost his daughter. It had become the place where he had found Eliza. "The first time I found you here," Alistair said, "I thought you were protecting my daughter." Eliza smiled. "I was." He looked at her. "I didn't realize you would end up protecting something else." She frowned gently. "What?" He took her hand. "The part of me I thought had disappeared with her mother." Eliza's eyes filled with emotion. Alistair continued, "If you had never worked in my household, if Clara had never found you in the snow, and if I had never known your mother's name, I would still want to know you." He squeezed her hand. "Will you give me the chance to spend the rest of my life doing so?" Eliza looked toward the house. Clara was watching them from a window. Then she looked back at him. "Yes." Some weeks later, Mrs. Hartwell was invited to Ravenshaw Hall. For the first time, she entered through the front doors, not as a dismissed servant, but as the mother of the woman the Duke intended to marry. Lady Helena was present and quietly acknowledged the wrong that had been done years before. There was no public humiliation, no revenge, only the restoration of a truth that should never have been buried. And when Alistair later stood with Eliza in the winter garden, he looked toward the place where he had found them, beneath the snow. "I still remember the first thing I asked about you." Eliza smiled. "What was that?" "Your name." She looked at him. "And now He took her hand. "Now I cannot imagine forgetting it." The night Alistair Ravenshaw found his daughter in the snow, he believed he had discovered a servant who had risked everything to protect his child. He had no idea that the woman's name would lead him back to a wrong his family had buried for years. He had no idea that correcting that wrong would change the life of the woman standing before him. And he certainly had no idea that the servant he had barely noticed would become the woman he could no longer imagine his home without. But Eliza had never needed a duke to rescue her. What she needed was for someone powerful enough to change the past, to finally have the courage to tell the truth. And when Alistair gave her the freedom to leave, she finally had the one thing no servant in his household had ever been promised: a choice. She chose to stay. Not because he was a duke, not because she owed him, not because he had saved her, but because somewhere between a winter garden and a little girl's outstretched arms, she had found a home she had never expected to want.